Tonight, we ease into the shadowy waters of the ancient Mediterranean, where two powers grow strong on opposite shores, each never fully aware of how their destinies are already set on a collision course. You picture yourself looking out over a wide blue horizon, the waves glittering under the sun. Beyond that horizon lie two worlds, one forged in stone and discipline, the other in sails and salt water. So take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I love knowing where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and the time down in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your mind drifts across the Italian peninsula, where Rome, still young compared to the civilizations of Greece or Egypt, is rising with a fierce determination. The city spreads out from its 7 hills, surrounded by fertile lands and defended by stone walls. Farmers become soldiers when the state calls, and citizens proud of their republic are woven tightly into a system where duty outweighs comfort. Rome's legions march with strict order, their rectangular shields and short swords designed for crushing formations. You imagine the metallic ring of armor, the dust of roads stretching outward like spokes from the heart of the city. Rome is land-bound in spirit, suspicious of the sea, yet ambitious beyond measure. Across the waters to the south and west, another great city flourishes. Carthage rises on the North African coast, close to what you know today as Tunisia. Here harbours stretch like open arms filled with ships painted with bright colours, sails swelling against the wind. Carthage is born from the Phoenicians of Tyre, master traders who crossed seas long before Rome had even left its hills. This new city grows into an empire of merchant sailors and silver-tongued negotiators. Its wealth is measured in trade, goods gold from Africa, tin from Britain, spices drifting in from the east. You picture bustling markets under the hot sun, merchants counting coins, the smell of olive oil and incense filling the air. These are not just two cities, they are two philosophies of life. Rome builds slowly and carefully, rooted in discipline and laws written on tablets of bronze. Carthage spins its web, quickly reaching outward across islands and coasts, tied together by fleets of sleek warships and contracts inked in backrooms. You sense already that such differences cannot coexist peacefully forever. When ambition is matched by ambition, when one claims the land and the other commands the sea, tension grows like a storm cloud on the horizon. What makes the story even more compelling is how unbalanced their strengths are. Rome commands legions that can march tirelessly, soldiers hardened by generations of war against neighboring tribes and rival Italian cities. Carthage commands the sea with its quinqueremes ships built for ramming and boarding, each one rowed by lines of oarsmen and guided by helmsmen who know every current. This difference sets the stage for conflict where each will be forced to learn the other's craft or perish. Historians still argue whether Carthage's reliance on hired mercenaries weakened its core strength, while Rome's citizen army gave it unmatched resilience. Yet in these early days, both powers radiate confidence as though nothing could truly threaten them. Curiously, Rome at this point is not even a seafaring power. Its people look inland toward the mountains and the plains of Italy. They treat the sea almost like a barrier, useful but dangerous, filled with storms and pirates. In contrast, Carthage's identity is inseparable from water. Its children grow up watching sails vanish into the horizon. Its wealth flows from distant harbours. You imagine the deep bronze of a Carthaginian coin stamped with the image of Baal Hammon or Tanit, the city's gods traded far and wide. This coin might reach Sicily, Sardinia, or Spain, all lands Rome has barely touched. Yet geography pulls them together. Sicily, that triangular island just off Italy's toe, lies close enough for Rome to taste, but long claimed by Carthage's sphere of influence. The island's fertile soil rolling fields and strategic harbours make it the jewel of the central Mediterranean. To hold Sicily is to hold the bridge between continents. You can almost see the map in your mind: Rome, to the north Carthage, to the south. Sicily balanced precariously in the middle like a stone waiting to be picked up. Both peoples are restless. Rome's senators debate expansion, their voices echoing under marble roofs. Carthage's council counts profits, calculating risks of confrontation, while never shying away from bold ventures. And you listening now can sense the inevitability. Two powers cannot sit so close without sparks. Those sparks will soon become flames, and the Mediterranean will never again be the same. You feel the cobblestones under your sandals as you walk through the heart of Rome, a republic that has clawed its way up from a cluster of villages on the banks of the Tiber River to become the dominant power on the Italian peninsula. The air smells of wood smoke and bread baking in clay ovens, the chatter of citizens filling the forum. This is not yet an empire, but it is already a city with imperial ambitions. You sense the pride in every Roman face, a pride in their institutions, their laws, and their way of life. The Roman Republic is ruled by two consuls elected yearly, always cautious to prevent any one man from becoming a king again. Beneath them sits the Senate, a body of wealthy aristocrats who guide the state's policies and guard its traditions. The system is rigid yet flexible enough to adapt to crises. Citizens take their political rights seriously, not just as privileges but as duties. When the Republic calls, they gather as soldiers forming the backbone of Rome's legions. Each legion is a machine of discipline, drilled in precise maneuvers, built on loyalty not to a general, but to the state itself. You imagine the training fields outside the city where young men learn to thrust with their gladius, to hold their heavy scutum shield in line with their neighbours. Each cohort becomes a wall of bronze and iron, a fortress that moves forward step by step. Rome does not fight with mercenaries, not in these years. Rome fights with its own blood. Historians still argue whether this citizen-soldier model gave Rome an unbreakable resilience, since every battle lost meant not just defeat, but families grieving and demanding revenge. Others say the same model sometimes pushed Rome into reckless wars, since citizens were ever eager to prove their valor. Curiously, even in the middle of this land-centered culture, religion saturates every public act. Priests observe the flight of birds before battle, augurs mark omens in the sky, and senators debate whether the gods favor war or peace. Rome's gods are practical, demanding sacrifices but offering protection. You picture altars smoking with incense, priests lifting bowls of wine. The people believe that victory flows from discipline but also from divine favor. Beyond religion, Rome's strength comes from its system of alliances. The Italian peninsula is stitched together by treaties that bind neighboring tribes and cities into the Roman orbit. These allies provide troop supplies and support in return for protection, and sometimes with the promise of eventual citizenship. It is a network that spreads Rome's influence far beyond its walls, making the Republic stronger than any one city should be. You feel the tension in this system, how loyalty is mixed with resentment, how allies sometimes dream of freedom, yet rely on Rome's shield. As you walk deeper into the Forum, you see statues of past heroes, men who defended the Republic against invaders, like the Gauls who once sacked the city. That humiliation lingers, whispering through Roman memory. Never again, they promise themselves, will Rome be so vulnerable. Every wall, every legion, every new conquest is part of that vow. This drive, born from both pride and fear, pushes Rome outward toward lands it does not yet know it needs. The people of Rome live simply compared to Carthage's wealthy merchants. Farmers dominate the social fabric, tending fields of wheat and vines, returning home to stone houses at dusk. Wealth exists, yes, in the hands of patricians who wear fine togas and dine on imported goods. But the heart of the Republic beats in the countryside, in the sweat of men and women tied to the soil. Rome's soldiers are those same farmers, leaving behind ploughs and orchards when war calls, then returning home if they survive to continue the cycle. It is a rhythm of life that binds land and blood together. You pause for a moment, listening to the sound of hammers in the distance. Rome is building always roads, aqueducts, fortifications. Its roads stretch like veins across the land, carrying soldiers swiftly to new frontiers. The stone beneath your feet is more than pavement. It is a declaration of permanence. This city intends to last forever. What is most striking as you stand here is Rome's confidence. They have already conquered their Italian neighbours, subdued the powerful Samnites, humbled the once proud Etruscans, and even faced Pyrrhus of Epirus, whose war elephants startled their legions but did not stop them. That memory lingers as a curious tidbit. Elephants, those strange beasts from the east, once clashed with Roman steel long before Hannibal. Even then Rome adapted, even then Rome endured. The Republic's ambition is undeniable. Its people whisper of Sicily, that fertile island so close just across the strait. They see it as both a promise and a threat. To Rome, control of Sicily means security, but it also means stepping into a world dominated by Carthage. The thought alone is enough to set senators debating late into the night, their words sharp as swords, their tempers rising. You sense in all of this the restless energy of a city that cannot stop growing. Rome is not yet the Rome of emperors, but the seeds are here: discipline, ambition, fear of vulnerability, and the certainty that destiny favors them. As you breathe in the air of the Forum, you feel that drive within yourself, a quiet certainty that this story is only beginning, that the Mediterranean is about to tremble under the weight of Rome's march. You let your gaze drift away from the stone streets of Rome, carried over the waves of the Mediterranean, until you find yourself standing before the gates of Carthage. The sun beats down upon whitewashed walls, the scent of salt and spice carried on a steady breeze. Here the air hums with the cries of merchants, the clang of shipwrights hammering planks, and the calls of sailors preparing vessels bound for distant coasts. Carthage is alive with commerce, its heartbeat not in marching legions but in bustling harbours. Founded by Phoenician settlers from Tyre centuries earlier, Carthage has grown into a city-state that rivals the greatest powers of the age. You imagine its legendary twin harbours one for trade, filled with cargo ships bearing goods from every corner of the known world, and another for war, circular in design with docks for over 200 sleek quinqueremes. At the centre stands an admiral's tower watching over the sea like an all-seeing eye. To walk here is to feel the pulse of a maritime empire, one bound not by roads and treaties, but by waves and wind. The ruling class of Carthage is unlike Rome's citizen farmers. Here, wealth is measured in coins and contracts. A council of elders, aristocrats, and merchants guides policy, often prioritizing profit and stability over glory. The suffeti leaders elected annually preside like judges more than generals, while the true power often rests in the hands of wealthy families. Among them, one name will echo through history: Barca. You sense already how their ambitions will collide with Rome's, though no one here could yet imagine the scale of that struggle. Carthage is a city of contradictions. On one hand, it thrives as a cosmopolitan hub, welcoming traders from Greece, Egypt, Iberia, and beyond. Its markets overflow with ivory from Africa, tin from Britain, silver from Spain, and textiles from the East. On the other hand, beneath its wealth runs a fierce devotion to its gods, Baal, Hammon, and Tanit. Temples rise above the city, their altars heavy with offerings. Historians still argue whether tales of child sacrifices at the Tophet are exaggerated by Rome's propaganda or reflect a darker truth of Carthaginian ritual. Either way, you cannot deny the power of faith here, binding the people together in prosperity and fear. Military power in Carthage flows not from citizen soldiers, but from coin. Unlike Rome's legions, Carthage hires mercenaries from across the Mediterranean: Libyan spearmen, Iberian swordsmen, Numidian cavalry, even Gallic warriors. They are fierce and skilled, yet their loyalty is often questioned. Curiously, Carthaginian citizens themselves rarely fight outside the city's walls, preferring to fund armies rather than join them. This reliance on mercenaries creates a vulnerability Rome will one day exploit, yet it also gives Carthage unmatched flexibility in assembling forces from far and wide. You stroll through the streets, past villas with mosaic floors, storerooms stacked with amphorae, and shipyards echoing with saws. The city smells of fish, resin, and foreign spices. Above all, it feels international, more open than Rome, less bound by rigid laws and citizenship. Carthage exists as a hub of wealth, not a fortress of discipline. Still, its pride runs deep. Its sailors are the best in the world, its traders the most cunning, its admirals unmatched. From this city radiates an empire that stretches over North Africa, Sardinia, Corsica, the Balearic Islands, and large swaths of Spain. Its colonies dot coastlines like pearls, each feeding wealth back to the mother city. Carthage does not conquer with legions and treaties. It conquers with contracts, garrisons, and naval supremacy. To control the seas is to control trade, and to control trade is to hold the Mediterranean's throat. You sense the tension simmering beneath this prosperity. Rome grows stronger each year, its armies pushing outward, its gaze fixed on Sicily. Carthage, meanwhile, sees itself as master of those waters, unwilling to share dominance with a land-bound rival. Historians debate whether war was truly inevitable or whether diplomacy might have prevented it. Some argue Carthage sought only peace and profit, others that its expansion in Sicily threatened Rome directly. The truth perhaps lies in both perspectives, two empires each unable to allow the other's rise. for now though Carthage basks in wealth and confidence. Ships depart, daily sails swelling as they carry goods across the horizon. In the markets silver clinks in eager hands. In the council chambers merchants plot routes and profits. You feel the hum of a city at its height, unaware that its very success will draw envy and fear. The Mediterranean is no longer wide enough for both Rome and Carthage. Their collision is coming, and the waves will carry the sound of their battles for generations to come. You let the hum of Carthage's harbour fade, and soon you are carried back across the waters to a place that lies in the middle of everything, the island of Sicily. Stretching like a three-cornered stone tossed into the sea, Sicily rests between Italy to the north and Africa to the south, with Greece not far to the east. Its mountains rise like watchful guardians, its valleys rich with grain and olives, its shores dotted with harbours that beckon ships from every direction. You breathe in the scent of fertile soil warmed by the Mediterranean sun, and you understand immediately why this island has long been fought over. Geography makes Sicily the crossroads of the ancient world. Whoever controls it controls the routes between east and west, north and south. Carthage has long held strongholds here, shaping the western half of the island with its colonies and alliances. Rome, however, sees the eastern cities with their Greek heritage as natural allies. The Greeks of Syracuse Agrigentum and Messina have flourished here for centuries, sometimes battling one another, sometimes bending under foreign influence, always caught between larger powers. Sicily is not just rich in soil, it is rich in opportunities for ambition. As you wander its imagined landscape, you picture fields swaying with wheat herds, grazing in green valleys, and ships unloading amphorae of wine and oil. Yet beneath this beauty lies constant friction. The Greek city-states clash with Carthaginian garrisons, local rulers shift loyalties with the winds, and mercenaries switch banners when the silver runs out. Historians still argue whether Sicily's divided nature was its strength or its curse, for while it attracted wealth, it also made the island a perpetual battlefield. For Rome, Sicily becomes both temptation and threat. The Republic's senators look south and see a land so close it almost feels like an extension of their own peninsula. If Carthage holds it, Rome is exposed to danger. If Rome gains it, their power will stretch beyond Italy for the first time. The stakes are nothing less than survival or dominance. You imagine heated debates in the Senate, voices rising over the question of whether to interfere in Sicilian quarrels. Some call for caution, warning that Rome has no business across the sea. Others argue that destiny demands boldness, that Sicily is Rome's natural inheritance. On Carthage's side, the island is already part of their sphere. Their fortresses guard western Sicily, their fleets patrol its waters, their merchants harvest its wealth. To Carthage, Rome's interest in Sicily feels like intrusion, even aggression. And so the seeds of hostility sprout in the soil of this island. A quarrel between minor cities will soon drag both giants into a conflict that neither truly plans, yet neither can avoid. Curiously, a small dispute in Messina, a city at the northeastern tip of Sicily, becomes the match. The Mamertines' mercenaries from Italy, who had seized the city, find themselves squeezed between Syracuse and Carthage. In desperation, they appeal first to Carthage for aid, then to Rome. Both respond, each eager to deny the other influence. And suddenly, a local quarrel has become a Mediterranean crisis. You sense how fragile the balance is, how easily alliances and betrayals tip the scales. As you walk through Messina's streets in your mind, you see nervous citizens watching Carthaginian soldiers arrive, then Roman envoys follow soon after. The city, once insignificant, now sits at the center of a storm. You realize this is how great wars often begin, not with grand declarations, but with small sparks in places few expected to matter. Historians debate whether Rome entered Sicily reluctantly drawn by allies or eagerly seizing its first chance to expand overseas. Whatever the motive, the result is the same. The First Punic War is about to begin. The island itself groans under the weight of these rivalries. Farmers wonder who will collect their taxes. Merchants fret over which coins will hold value, and soldiers sharpen swords, not knowing which side they will fight for tomorrow. Sicily becomes less a home and more a chessboard, each square contested by Rome and Carthage, each piece moved by ambition. You imagine the mountains echoing with the tramp of legions, the coastline flashing with sails, the fields burned when armies march through. Sicily is beautiful, but now it is destined to be scarred. As night falls over the island, you see flickering torches on the horizon, Roman camps being pitched on one side, Carthaginian watchfires glowing on the other. The air feels heavy with tension, the sea restless, as if it knows what is to come. This is the crossroads of the Mediterranean, and now it is also the crossroads of fate. Rome and Carthage have stepped onto the same island, and once they do, neither can step back. The first collision is about to shatter the silence, and Sicily will be the battlefield where two worlds test their strength. You stand on the narrow strait where Italy almost touches Sicily, the water running like a river between two continents. The city beside you is Messina. Today you call it Messina, perched at the island's northeastern tip, its walls looking across to the toe of Italy as if the town itself leans forward reaching for help. The streets are tense, the alleys crowded with men who did not grow up here. They are the Mamertine sons of Mars, Italian mercenaries who seized Messina years ago and now find their grip slipping. The tide of fortune turns as quickly as the current in the strait, and you feel how precarious their situation has become. Syracuse presses from the south under the sharp, capable rule of Hierotetti. Carthage hovers by sea, measuring profit and position. To hold Messina is to hold a key, one that can open the door to Sicily or lock it against mainland Italy. You watch a council gather in a lamplit hall, the Mamertine leaders arguing in strained voices. Their coins are thinning, their enemies thickening. Some urge a bargain with Carthage, others whisper a plea to Rome. Pride clashes with fear, hope with calculation. Historians still argue whether the Mamertines were simple brigands or strategic placeholders for Italian influence, and whether Rome's decision to hear them was reluctant duty or keen opportunity. The candle flames shiver as the debate sways, and at last the messengers hurry to the docks, two envoys, two directions, two possible futures. Carthaginian triremes arrive first. Their prows gleam with bronze oar banks, feathering the water in perfect rhythm. A Carthaginian commander, his cloak salt-stiff, his face composed, steps ashore and assures the Mamertines that Carthage will protect them against Syracuse. A small garrison settles in. You sense the relief in the streets, money from the harbours begins to flow again, guards tighten the gates, and a treaty is inked in quick, pragmatic strokes. But the thing about quick treaties is that they do not stop the slow-boiling fear of being trapped. The Mamertines stare across the channel at the Italian mainland and wonder whether they have exchanged one threat for another Syracuse, for Carthage, danger, for dependence. Then the Roman envoys arrive. They cross the strait in small craft, the green water slapping at the hulls, carrying with them the dry prudence of the Senate and the restless energy of a people just strong enough to dream of more. They look at the Carthaginian standards flying above Messina and do not like what they see. For Rome, this strait is a doorway, and a Carthaginian key in that lock feels perilously close to the heart. Still caution rules in the Curia. Wars cost citizens votes and tears. You hear the quiet debates travelling back to Rome, a faction urging restraint, another whispering that if Rome does not step into Sicily, now it may never do so on favourable terms again. The decision comes, as momentous choices often do, in a form that looks almost ordinary. A consul for the year 264 BC Appius Claudius Caudex receives authority to assist the Mamertines. The phrasing is careful, the meaning is not. This will be Rome's first crossing beyond Italy with legions. You picture men sharpening iron-loading grain, testing the seams of leather tents. A curious tidbit drifts through. Roman farmers talk about the harvest and the price of oil as they prepare to march onto ships, a blend of homely concerns and historic leaps that always seems to accompany Rome's expansions. As the Roman transports skirt the coast and slip into the strait, Carthaginian scouts blow conch horns from their decks. Syracuse mobilizes as well. Hiero, too, is no fool. He understands that a Roman foothold in Messina threatens every calculation that has kept his city prosperous and secure. Within days, the world's edges seem to fold inward: Carthage by sea, Syracuse by land, Rome by the narrow water, until Messina becomes a pressure point for all three. The streets grow tight with shielded bodies, signals flash from the walls, the harbour smells of pitch and fear. Inside the city, the Mamertines swing again. They dismiss the Carthaginian garrison to show goodwill to Rome, a gamble that backfires immediately. Carthage, insulted by the dismissal, anchors a fleet at the mouth of the strait and joins Syracuse in blockading the city. It is a rare alignment. Carthage and Syracuse, often rivals now, briefly rowing in the same direction to keep Rome out. You sensed the panic behind Messina's gates, where the leaders realized too late that pleasing both giants means pleasing neither. Night falls, and with it a hush before the coming noise. You feel the slight tremor of oars through the water as Roman craft slip across. Appius Claudius lands with portions of his force, the soldiers forming up by moonlight shields, locked pillar, grounded like fence posts biting the soil. The First Punic War begins not with triumphal speeches, but with careful movements in darkness, with men trying to read the intentions of other men over the rim of a shield. A mainstream historical fact settles into your awareness in 264 BC. Rome crosses into Sicily for the first time with a consul-led expedition to aid the Mamertines at Messina, triggering the long war with Carthage. At dawn, Syracuse presses in. Hiero's troops advance with the practiced cadence of a Hellenistic army, pikes, bristling slingers ready. The Romans countercharge, compact and stubborn, the ground shaking under their boots. The clash is hard and immediate. Syracuse tests, withdraws, tests again, measuring this new opponent on Sicilian soil. Over the next days, Hiero calculates as carefully as he fights, and you can almost hear the abacus beads clicking in his mind. Rome is not merely a hired friend of the Mamertines. Rome is a force that will not easily sail away. He breaks off and retreats to protect his interests, preserving his army. In time, he will seek terms with Rome and become a steadfast ally, a pivot that reshapes the island's politics and gives Rome a supply base it desperately needs. Carthage remains sour and watchful, its ships holding the strait, its commanders sending sharp reports back to the council. You overhear fragments of future blame. One officer associated in later sources with the name Hanno is said to have negotiated too softly with the Mamertines and yielded ground. Carthaginian politics can be ruthless toward failure. Punishment is severe, though you avert your gaze from the details. What matters for your sleepy mind is the lesson both sides learn. Sicily will not be decided by quick bargains or showy gestures. It will be decided by endurance. Word of Messina races across the Mediterranean. In Roman taverns, people argue whether helping mercenaries who once stole a city is worthy of the Republic. In Carthaginian counting rooms, merchants tap the ledgers and warn that a Roman presence threatens the profit geometry of every trade route. Historians still argue whether Rome's intervention violated earlier understandings with Carthage, or whether those understandings were too vague to bind a rising power determined to protect the mainland's doorway. The debate may never settle neatly because motives rarely do. Fear, pride, and chance all row together in the same boat. You feel the narrative tighten the way a rope pulls taut when two ships drift apart. Messina has changed the scale of possibility. The Romans have learned they can cross land and hold. The Carthaginians have learned that Rome will not be kept on its peninsula. The Syracusans have learned that betting on the future sometimes means choosing the longer, steadier partner over the nearer, flashier patron. And the Mamertines, well, they have learned that inviting giants to supper means making room at your table forever. Walk once more along the wall. The strait glitters under a high sun. Beyond the Italian coast looks close enough to touch, and yet the distance between worlds has widened. What began as a local quarrel has become a continental question. You hear carpenters already at work in distant Roman shipyards, smell fresh pitch heating in braziers, sense the weight of decisions that will teach Rome the sea and test Carthage on land. The match at Messina is struck, and the spark curls upward into the broad, dry thatch of Sicilian ambition. The First Punic War has its true beginning here, in a city that asked for help and found history instead. You feel the spray of salt on your face as the winds stiffen, carrying you along Rome's rugged coastline toward newly built shipyards. The smell of sawdust and pitch mixes with the sea air, and the hammering of carpenters rings louder than temple bells. Rome has stepped into Sicily, but to fight Carthage there it must meet the empire of sails and oars on its own terms, and so the Republic, once a landlocked power, begins a transformation. You picture senators debating the cost, farmers wondering who will tend the fields, and soldiers shifting uneasily at the thought of boarding vessels instead of marching roads. Rome is learning the sea, and the lesson will be hard, costly, and dramatic. At first, the Romans are clumsy sailors. They know how to march in lines, but not how to balance on decks that sway beneath their feet. They drill with shields and pila, but their hands blister on oars. Yet necessity is a stern teacher. Rome knows that without a fleet it will never break Carthage's grip on Sicily. A curious tidbit slips in. Tradition claims the Romans captured a wrecked Carthaginian quinquereme and used it as a model, copying its design plank for plank. Whether legend or truth, the image is vivid. You see carpenters crouched over the timbers of a battered hull, measuring, marking, and reproducing the very weapon that once terrified them. The new warships take shape, quinqueremes, massive vessels with 5 banks of oars per side, rowed by 300 men. Above the oarsmen stand marines with helmets glinting in the sun, ready to fight once the ships close. The Roman fleet grows rapidly, and with it grows a new style of combat. For Carthage, naval battles are about maneuver, outflanking, ramming, breaking enemy hulls with bronze prows. But Rome, inexperienced at sea, decides to turn water into land. They invent the corvus, a boarding bridge fitted with a heavy spike. As an enemy ship approaches the bridge, slams down, biting into the deck, allowing Roman soldiers to rush across. In essence, Rome transforms sea battles into land battles, a domain where its discipline gives it the edge. Historians still argue whether the corvus was truly as decisive as Roman sources claim. Some suggest it was cumbersome, making ships unstable in rough seas. Others note how devastating it was in early engagements, when Carthaginian sailors suddenly found themselves facing legionaries charging across wooden gangways. Either way, you can feel the shift in momentum. Rome has found a way to neutralize Carthage's centuries of seamanship with ingenuity and sheer stubbornness. You imagine the first great test, Roman sailors rowing awkwardly into position, Carthaginian admirals smiling confidently, certain that speed and experience will scatter these landlubbers. Then suddenly the bridges crash down, shields rise, and disciplined formations surge onto enemy decks. The Carthaginians, expecting a naval duel, find themselves in a land skirmish atop wooden planks. Confusion ripples across the sea as victory after victory tilts toward Rome. The surprise is profound. The Republic, barely a naval power yesterday, now holds its own against masters of the sea. Still, the cost is heavy. Ships sink in storms, inexperienced crews panic in high winds, and resources stretch thin. You picture Roman mothers anxiously waiting for sons not returning from unfamiliar waters. This is no longer the familiar rhythm of campaigning in Italy. It is something larger, more dangerous. Yet the Senate persists because they sense the stakes. Control of Sicily, control of the sea routes, control of the Mediterranean, it all lies beyond the waves. Curiously, in the middle of these struggles, Rome still tries to keep one foot on land. Consuls lead armies across Sicily's interior, besieging Carthaginian strongholds, while others take fleets to raid African coasts. The war expands in every direction, a true Mediterranean struggle. You feel the strain on both sides, like two wrestlers locked together, neither able to throw the other, both growing weary, but too proud to release their grip. The psychological shift is as important as the tactical one. Rome, by forcing itself to build a fleet, proves something to itself and to the world. No challenge is too alien, no domain too foreign. Carthage may have centuries of naval experience, but Rome's determination is deeper than tradition. It adapts, it innovates, it refuses to yield. You hear the voices of senators boasting that the Republic can master anything, land or sea, if necessity demands it. The citizens too begin to believe it. As night falls over the shipyards, you see torches glowing along the scaffolds, shadows of men climbing, rigging, testing sails, hammering nails into fresh planks. The harbour smells of tar resin and ambition. Somewhere in the dark, a Corvus bridge waits to be lowered for the first time, its iron spike gleaming faintly in the firelight. The Mediterranean, once Carthage's domain, now hears the creak of Roman ships joining its chorus. You sense the waters shifting with history, the tide turning slowly but surely. The war is far from decided, yet the balance no longer feels certain. Rome has stepped onto the sea, and the world will never be the same. The air feels heavy with smoke and salt as you approach the western tip of Sicily, where the city of Lilybaeum clings stubbornly to the edge of the island. Its walls rise high and solid, braced against the sea, winds bastions of stone that seem to dare any army to try its strength. Carthaginian banners flutter crimson above the battlements, and below them harbours bustle with ships slipping in and out, carrying supplies, men, and messages across the short water to Africa. To control Sicily, Rome must take Lilybaeum, and so begins a siege that will drag on for nearly a decade, grinding armies down like waves pounding against cliffs. You imagine the year is 250 BC and the Roman consuls have marched their legions across scorched fields and battered roads to ring the city. Camps sprout outside Lilybaeum's gates, earthworks rise, siege towers creak into place. Soldiers sharpen their peeler carting stones for catapults, hammering stakes into palisades. The Romans are determined to starve the city out, to choke it until Carthage lets go. But Lilybaeum is no ordinary fortress. It is a lifeline, a key symbol. Carthaginian commanders within the walls vow never to yield, and their allies across the sea refuse to abandon them. At night you picture the sky glowing with fire as Roman engines hurl stones, smashing against towers, sending dust clouds spiraling. By day you hear the clash of sorties as Carthaginian defenders rush out to burn Roman siege works, cutting down soldiers, then retreating swiftly behind their gates. The city's walls are battered but never broken. Each assault Rome throws is met with defiance. Historians still argue whether Lilybaeum's resilience came from Carthaginian engineering, Roman mismanagement, or simply the determination of its garrison. Whatever the reason, the siege becomes a stalemate, testing patience as much as courage. Carthaginian sailors prove equally bold. In a curious tidbit preserved by ancient accounts, blockade runners slip into Lilybaeum under cover of night, their crews steering light, fast ships across stormy seas. They time their arrivals, carefully hugging coastlines, vanishing into fog, sometimes smashing through Roman lines with sudden bursts of speed. Supplies, reinforcements, even fresh horses arrive inside the city, keeping morale high and resistance alive. You can almost hear the cheers of defenders on the walls as another blockade runner bursts through sails tattered but cargo intact. Rome may surround Lilybaeum on land, but the sea still belongs to Carthage. Storms complicate everything. Winter gales batter both camps, flattening tents, scattering supplies, drowning men and animals in sudden floods. The siege turns not just into a contest between armies, but between human endurance and the elements. You imagine weary legionaries huddled around fires, cloaks soaked, watching rain turn trenches into rivers. Carthaginian defenders fare no better. Their food rationed, their nights filled with watch duty on the ramparts. For nearly 10 years the city and its besiegers endure this relentless grind. The frustration spills into politics. In Rome, senators demand results. Their voices sharp in the Curia, their patience thinning with every report of stalemate. Carthage, too, feels the weight. Merchants grumble at the endless expense generals argue over strategies. Families wonder how long the treasury can bleed, and yet neither side retreats, for both Lilybaeum has become more than a city. It is pride itself, stubbornness turned into stone. To yield would mean dishonor, and neither Rome nor Carthage is willing to taste that humiliation. Curiously, within this drawn-out struggle, individual moments of brilliance flash like lightning. One Roman engineer constructs massive battering rams only for Carthaginian fire ships to sweep down and burn them. A Carthaginian commander launches a sudden sally, cutting through Roman lines and vanishing before reinforcements arrive. Each move, each counter-move, keeps the struggle alive without ever resolving it. Historians still debate whether Rome could have shortened the siege with better naval dominance, or whether Carthage's blockade running would have always made it impossible. You pause, taking in the wider view. The siege of Lilybaeum is not just about walls and gates. It is about the way war in this age begins to stretch longer, consuming generations rather than seasons. Soldiers grow old in camps, consuls come and go, Carthaginian admirals die and are replaced, yet the city still stands. Imagine how it feels for the people of Sicily caught between these powers' fields, burned markets, empty homes, abandoned their island, turned into the chessboard of giants. One night you see flickers on the horizon, Carthaginian ships, their oars flashing as they approach, the wind filling their sails. Roman galleys surge out to meet them, the clash of rams echoing across the waves. Fire leaps from deck to deck, men scream into the dark, and in the morning the sea is strewn with wreckage. Yet somehow, despite all the carnage, Lilybaeum still endures, its walls blackened but unbroken, its people unbowed. By the end, the siege does not truly end at all. Rome simply learns to live with the fact that Lilybaeum cannot be taken easily, that battles elsewhere will decide Sicily's fate. The city remains Carthaginian until the very end of the First Punic War, a stubborn holdout that proves no fortress is impregnable, but some are close enough to feel that way. As you drift from the smoke-filled camps and battered walls you carry with you, the lesson that sometimes history turns not on swift victories, but on the grinding test of endurance, where neither side dares to give in, and both discover how much they are willing to sacrifice. The sea glitters beneath a sharp Sicilian sun as you shift your gaze from Lilybaeum's stubborn walls to the open waters where fleets clash like rolling storms. It is 241 BC near the Aegates Islands off Sicily's western tip, and the final breath of the First Punic War is about to be exhaled. Rome, battered and nearly bankrupted after more than 2 decades of struggle, has mustered one last fleet funded not by state coffers, but by wealthy citizens contributing their fortunes for victory. You imagine the senators, patricians, and merchants writing out pledges of silver and grain, aware that failure here means ruin, not just for Rome's pride, but for its survival. The Roman ships slide out into the channel, newly built, lighter than before, their timbers still smelling of resin. The Corvus boarding bridges, once Rome's secret weapon, have been abandoned, too heavy, too dangerous in stormy seas. Now the fleet sails stripped down and lean, relying on faster movement and trained crews. It is a curious tidbit that in these final years of the war, the Romans, once clumsy at sea, have become seasoned sailors, their hands hardened on oars, their eyes reading the winds with confidence once reserved for Carthaginians. Across the water, the Carthaginian fleet approaches, sails bulging with supplies meant to resupply Lilybaeum and Drepanum. The commanders are not eager for a pitched battle. They hope to slip through, deliver food and reinforcements, and prolong the war. But the Romans have positioned themselves perfectly, blocking the approach with determination, sharpened by desperation. Both sides know that this battle will decide not just Sicily's fate, but the balance of power across the Mediterranean. The clash begins in the early morning. You hear the drum beats rise as Roman rowers dig their oars deep, the hulls surging forward with steady power. Carthaginian ships, faster and more maneuverable, dart in to ram their bronze prows, glinting like spearheads. For a moment it seems the old masters of the sea will win once more. But the Romans have adapted. They keep their line tight, their ships braced to absorb impacts, then counter by ramming back with sheer weight. The crash of timber on timber reverberates across the waves, followed by the cries of marines as decks splinter beneath them. The battle rages for hours, the sea foaming red and white as shattered planks and broken oars drift past. Carthaginian captains try to outmaneuver, but the wind betrays them, shifting at a critical moment, slowing their advance. Roman sailors seize the opportunity, pressing harder, their discipline holding firm. You picture the faces of legionary marines leaping aboard enemy ships, swords, flashing shields, braced, cutting down panicked crews, unused to Rome's relentless close-quarters assault. Historians still argue whether it was superior seamanship, favorable winds, or sheer determination that gave Rome the edge at egates. Perhaps it was all three converging in a single decisive moment. As midday's sun climbs high, the battle tips irrevocably. Carthaginian ships falter, some capsizing, others captured. Supplies meant for Lilybaeum sink beneath the waves, food and hope vanishing into the sea. Roman cheers echo across the water, their cries rising with the spray, their exhaustion drowned in the triumph of survival. When the last Carthaginian sails vanish over the horizon, the outcome is clear. Carthage cannot continue. The war has drained its coffers, broken its fleets, and strangled its will. A curious thought lingers with you. 23 years of war, thousands of lives, countless ships, all coming down to a single naval clash at the edge of Sicily. From the siege of Agrigentum to the long grind at Lilybaeum, from the first clumsy Corvus experiments to this final clean victory, Rome has grown into something new. It is no longer just a land power. The Republic has tested itself on sea and proven that it can master whatever it chooses. The peace that follows is harsh. Carthage agrees to surrender Sicily, its first major overseas loss, and pays a crushing indemnity in silver. Rome claims the island as its first province, a word that will come to mean empire, but here begins as nothing more than territory under Roman control. You sense how quietly history pivots in that moment. Carthage, once unchallenged on the seas, now looks weakened, resentful, yet not destroyed. Rome, once confined Italy, now owns land across the water. Both are changed forever, and neither can accept the new balance as permanent. As you drift away from the Aegates, you hear the gulls crying over wreckage still bobbing in the surf. Broken masts jut out like gravestones from the sea, marking the end of the First Punic War. But beneath the solemnity lies a warning. Carthage is wounded, but not finished. Rome has triumphed, but at great cost. You can almost hear the echo of voices across the years, fathers swearing their sons to vengeance, senators muttering that Rome must stay vigilant traders, worrying that new wars will follow old ones. And they are right. The Mediterranean has not seen its last storm. The roar of the sea at the A-gates fades, and you find yourself back in Rome, where the streets buzz with victory and exhaustion. It is 241 BC, and the First Punic War has finally ended. Yet the mood is not entirely celebratory. Yes, Sicily is now under Roman control, the Republic's first overseas province, but the cost has been staggering. The treasury groans under debts, families count their dead, and soldiers limp home with scars from decades of relentless campaigning. You picture the forum alive with procession senators in white-bordered togas proclaiming triumph, but also quiet corners where widows whisper about empty fields and sons who will not return. The terms of peace bite deep into Carthage. The Republic of traders and sailors must hand over Sicily and pay Rome a massive indemnity, 3,200 talents of silver, over 10 years. To a city built on commerce, this is humiliation, a stain on its pride. Carthaginian merchants watch coins drain from their coffers, and soldiers grumble that they fought for decades, only to see their empire shrunken. You can almost feel the bitterness thick in Carthage's air, a simmering resentment that will not vanish easily. Curiously, the peace sparks a new crisis almost immediately. Carthage, unable to pay its mercenaries after years of fighting, faces the mercenary war, a brutal rebellion of unpaid soldiers who turn on their former masters. For 3 years, Carthage fights for survival, not against Rome, but against its own hired armies. The irony is sharp. The very reliance on mercenaries that gave Carthage flexibility now nearly destroys it. Historians still argue whether this civil war permanently weakened Carthage's ability to face Rome again, or whether it hardened the city with lessons in desperation. Either way, it leaves scars as deep as those from the Punic struggle itself. Rome, meanwhile, does not sit idle. The Republic seizes the moment to expand, further annexing Sardinia and Corsica lands Carthage once held. The islands are small compared to Sicily, but their capture sends a message Rome now claims the central Mediterranean as its sphere. You can almost hear the rumblings in the Senate voices proud of new provinces, others warning that overextension invites peril. Yet the momentum of expansion is unstoppable. Rome has tasted the sea and found it intoxicating. On the Italian mainland, the mood is restless too. Farmers return to find fields neglected, debts piled high. Soldiers who fought in Sicily for years discover that the world they left behind has shifted. Families strain, allies grumble, but the Republic presses on, driven by its belief in destiny. A curious tidbit appears in the records. During this period, Romans begin building more permanent roads and aqueducts, as if preparing not just for defense, but for an empire that will need infrastructure stretching far beyond Italy. Victory has taught Rome that it can and must plan bigger. In Carthage, the loss of Sicily forces a turn toward new horizons. Eyes shift westward to Iberia, rich in silver mines and manpower. Generals dream of rebuilding strength there, forging a new empire to replace what was lost. Among them is Hamilcar Barca, the fierce commander who fought Rome to the last in Sicily. He believes Carthage must recover or perish, and his vision of expansion in Spain will plant the seeds of the next, bloodier conflict. You see him boarding ships with his sons, the wind-filling sails bound for Iberia determination, etched deep in his face. Historians debate whether the First Punic War was truly decisive. Some argue it made Rome inevitable as a Mediterranean power, teaching the Republic how to fight beyond its borders. Others claim it was only a prelude, that the real struggle, the clash that would define centuries, was still to come with Hannibal and the Second Punic War. Whatever the interpretation, one truth is clear: the balance has shifted. Carthage is no longer the unrivaled naval empire, and Rome is no longer a land-bound republic. Both have been transformed, scarred, and sharpened. You wander through Rome's markets, hearing the mingling sounds of triumph and complaint. Traders sell Sicilian grain cheaper now under Roman control. Veterans boast of naval battles, showing scars with pride. But beneath the noise you sense an undercurrent of unease. Victory has not brought peace of mind. Instead, it has brought a new awareness. Rome now has enemies, farther afield responsibilities heavier than before, and rivals who will not forgive easily. As dusk settles over the Mediterranean, you see the two cities from above Rome rising steadily. Carthage rebuilding cautiously, both bound by resentment and ambition. The First Punic War may be over, but in truth it feels like only an interlude. The hatred seeded in these years will bloom again, fiercer and more personal. The sea that glittered with wreckage at Egert's now lies deceptively calm, as though waiting for the next storm. And you, lulled by the rhythm of waves and the hum of the night, know in your bones that this story is far from finished. The waters around Sicily fade from view, and now you are carried inland across the plains of Iberia, where the scent of wild thyme and dust fills the air. Here, after the First Punic War, Carthage looks westward to recover what it lost. At the head of this renewal stands Hamilcar Barca, a general of iron will, whose very name means thunderbolt. You see him astride a horse on a rugged hill, gazing out over the land of silver, and soldiers, his sons, by his side, boys who will inherit his hatred of Rome like a family heirloom. Hamilcar fought Rome until the bitter end in Sicily. Defeated but unbroken, he returns home to find Carthage weakened, its treasury drained, its pride wounded. Yet he does not despair. Instead, he crafts a new plan to rebuild Carthage's strength in Iberia, where mines glitter with silver and warriors abound. This land can become a new base far from Roman interference, a forge to rearm and repay the humiliation inflicted by Sicily's loss. Historians still argue whether Hamilcar's ambitions were personal vengeance, pragmatic survival, or both. What no one doubts is that his vision reshaped Carthage's future. The oath comes alive before you, now carried on the whisper of ancient sources. Hamilcar leads his young son Hannibal to the altar of Baal-Hamon, the great Carthaginian god. The boy's hand is placed upon the sacrifice, and the father swears him to eternal enmity with Rome. Never be a friend to the Romans, he says, or so tradition records. The details may be embellished, but the symbolism is undeniable. A seed is planted in the child's heart, one that will grow into fire. You feel the weight of that vow, the way it echoes down the years like the low roll of thunder before a storm. Life in Iberia is harsh, yet rich. Carthaginian generals establish colonies, raise armies, and mine silver to fill their coffers. Mercenaries are recruited, Iberian swordsmen fierce in close combat, Numidian cavalry swift as shadows, Gallic warriors wild and bold. Carthage begins to recover its economy, humming again, its ambitions rekindled. Rome watches uneasily from across the sea, aware that a humbled rival is stirring back to life. A curious tidbit emerges here. Iberian silver coins struck under Carthaginian authority start to circulate, widely stamped with images of gods and warlike symbols, reminders that money itself can be a weapon. Meanwhile, in Rome, the Senate debates. Some senators urge caution, others demand vigilance. Carthage is weakened, they say, but not destroyed. The indemnities are being paid, but wealth flows once more into Carthaginian hands. Rome tightens its grip on Sardinia and Corsica, ensuring Carthage cannot reclaim them. The balance is tense like a rope drawn taut across the sea. Hamilcar, restless and daring campaigns constantly in Iberia, extending Carthage's reach inland. He fights tribal chieftains, strikes bargains, and builds a reputation as both warrior and strategist. You picture him moving swiftly through hills and valleys, his soldiers loyal, his enemies wary, but fate is unkind. Around 229 BC, while fighting in Iberia, Hamilcar dies. Accounts differ. Some say in battle against a rebellious tribe, others that he drowned while retreating across a river. Historians still argue over the details, but the result is clear. His vision must pass to others. The torch does not fall into darkness. It is taken up by his son-in-law, Hasdrubal the Fair, who continues to expand Carthaginian power in Iberia with diplomacy as much as force. Yet it is Hamilcar's children who carry the true flame, especially the boy sworn at the altar. Hannibal Fierce-eyed grows into a commander shaped by his father's teachings and by the memory of humiliation. Carthage's new empire in Spain becomes not just a base of wealth, but a launchpad for vengeance. You linger on the oath once more. Perhaps it happened exactly as the sources describe. Perhaps it is a story told later to explain Hannibal's fury. But even if the details blur, the meaning remains. Carthage has not forgotten Sicily, nor the indemnities, nor the insult of Rome's growing power. The hatred has passed into a new generation, carried in Hannibal's very blood. And you, standing in the dusty Iberian hills, feel the Mediterranean trembling again, for you know that this boy will one day march against Rome itself across mountains thought impassable in a war fiercer than the first. As night falls, the silver mines glint faintly under starlight caravans of ore moving steadily toward Carthaginian ships. The air is thick with the sound of pickaxes and the murmur of soldiers around their fires. Somewhere in the shadows, Hannibal sharpens his skills, watching, learning, preparing. Carthage is wounded but not broken, and the storm his father began still gathers strength. The republics of Rome and Carthage may think they have peace, but you sense it is only an uneasy pause before the clash resumes deeper and deadlier than before. The dust of Iberia still clings to your sandals as you follow Carthage's gaze deeper into the Spanish heartland. The rivers glisten with silver-bearing ore, and hills echo with the sound of miners striking stone their tools, sending sparks into the evening light. After Hamilcar's death, command passes to Hasdrubal the Fair, his son-in-law, who extends Carthaginian influence less with swords and more with treaties. You picture him seated at a long table, beneath striped awnings, speaking softly with tribal chieftains, offering coin and contracts rather than iron and blood. Carthage grows rich again, its coffers swelling with Iberian silver, its confidence returning like the tide. Hasdrubal builds a new capital, Carthago Nova. Today's Cartagena, its harbour, deep and safe, its walls formidable. From this city, Carthage directs its Iberian empire, drawing wealth and warriors alike. Historians still argue whether Hasdrubal's strategy was brilliant statecraft or a temporary patch, but even skeptics admit he gave Carthage breathing room to rebuild after the catastrophe of the First Punic War. A curious tidbit glimmers here. Carthago Nova's mines are said to have produced enough silver each day to pay thousands of mercenaries turning raw earth into armies. Meanwhile in Rome, senators watch with tightening brows. They know Carthage is regaining strength far from Sicily in lands that seem distant but are connected by ships and trade. To check this growth, they negotiate their own treaty with Hasdrubal. One clause becomes famous. Carthage promises not to cross the river Ebro in northern Spain with arms. The river becomes a boundary line visible on maps, invisible in nature, yet carrying the weight of a fragile peace. But beneath the surface ambition simmers. Hamilcar's son Hannibal grows into command under Hasdrubal's guidance. By the time Hasdrubal is assassinated in 221 BC, stabbed by a Celtic slave, if ancient sources are believed, Hannibal is ready. At just 26, he is chosen by the army in Spain to be commander. Carthage ratifies the decision, and suddenly the boy sworn to hatred at his father's side now holds the full weight of Carthage's armies. You imagine him standing in Carthago Nova's forum, armored, dark-eyed, his soldiers cheering. The oath has ripened into destiny. Hannibal wastes no time. He campaigns against tribes resistant to Carthaginian rule, his victories swift and decisive. His army becomes a blend of Iberian infantry, Libyan spearmen, and the nimble Numidian cavalry whose horses seem to fly across the plains. This melting pot of warriors drawn from every corner of Carthage's influence learns to fight as one under Hannibal's command. You hear their chants by firelight languages mingling their loyalty binding not to Carthage's council of merchants but to the young general himself. The spark that will light the Second Punic War lies in a small Iberian city called Saguntum, south of the Ebro. Rome claims Saguntum as its ally, though it sits in Carthaginian territory under the treaty. Hannibal sees it as a provocation, a foothold that Rome will use to squeeze Carthage in Spain. In 219 BC, he marches on Saguntum, besieging its walls for months until hunger and fire bring it down. The cries of the defeated echo across the Mediterranean, reaching Rome like the toll of a bell. In the Curia, senators pound their fists on marble benches. To them this is clear violation of the treaty, an insult too great to ignore. Voices rise. Carthage must be punished. Hannibal must be handed over. When Carthage refuses, Rome declares war. The uneasy peace has snapped. The Second Punic War begins. You feel the weight of inevitability. Carthage could not remain humbled forever. Rome could not tolerate a rival's resurgence. Saguntum is the spark, but the tinder has been laid for years. Historians still debate whether Hannibal deliberately provoked Rome or simply defended Carthaginian rights. Some call him reckless, others a genius, playing the only hand he had. Either way, the die is cast. As night settles over Iberia, you see campfires glowing along the hills. Hannibal's army gathered for the march of their lives. Beyond the mountains lie the lands of Gauls and the looming Alps. Beyond them, Italy and the heart of Rome. Carthage has rebuilt its strength here in Spain, but Hannibal intends not to guard it passively. He intends to carry war across the seas, across the mountains, directly into Rome's soil. You sense the ground itself, vibrating with the approach of hooves and the restless energy of elephants stamping in their corrals. The storm is about to break. You feel the wind rising across the Iberian plains as Hannibal rallies his army for Rome's punishment. It is the year 218 BC, and the Carthaginian commander has just crossed a threshold by seizing Saguntum. He had provoked Rome's fury and opened the gates of war. But Hannibal does not wait for Rome to strike first. Instead, he prepares to carry the fight directly into enemy territory, taking the offensive with boldness that will astonish the world. His strategy is not to defend Carthage from afar, but to bring Rome itself to its knees, to peel away its allies in Italy and unravel the Republic from within. You picture his army gathering Iberian swordsmen with curved falcatas, gleaming Libyan spearmen, steady and disciplined Numidian cavalry, swift and unpredictable, and towering among them the elephants, their tusks capped with bronze, their hides draped in coloured cloth. The force swells to nearly 90,000 soldiers and thousands of horses, a patchwork of peoples and tongues united under Hannibal's command. The young general speaks with fire, promising victory, wealth, and vengeance. His men cheer, stamping feet into the dusty soil, their voices rising into the night sky. The march begins northward, following the coast, crossing rivers, skirmishing with hostile tribes. Each step takes them closer to Rome's heartland, but also further from Carthage's supply lines. Rome is aware of Hannibal's moves, but it does not yet grasp his full intention. The Senate expects him to remain in Spain or perhaps move into southern Gaul. Few, if any, imagine he will attempt the impossible, to cross the Alps, with his entire army elephants included, and descend into Italy like a storm from the mountain. Before that audacious crossing, though, Hannibal secures his flank in Spain. In the late autumn of 218 BC, he leaves his brother Hasdrubal in command with orders to hold Iberia and send reinforcements when possible. Hannibal himself pushes north into Gaul, forging alliances with tribes hostile to Rome, cajoling others with gold. Here, a curious tidbit surfaces. Roman envoys actually tried to intercept Hannibal before he crossed the Ebro, demanding he stand down. But Hannibal, smiling, ignored them already, envisioning himself on the march to Rome. Meanwhile, Rome sends consuls Publius Cornelius Scipio and Tiberius Sempronius Longus with armies to counter. Scipio sails to Massilia, modern Marseille, hoping to block Hannibal in Gaul. But Hannibal moves too swiftly, slipping past him by land, driving his army toward the Rhone. The Romans arrive to find the Carthaginian trail already cold. In this race of speed and nerve, Hannibal is always one step ahead. The armies collide first at Cissa near Tarraco in northeastern Spain, where a Roman force under Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio, brother of the consul, clashes with Carthaginian allies. Here, Rome strikes an early blow. They defeat the Carthaginian commander Hanno, capturing supplies and securing much of the Ebro Valley. The battle is small compared to what lies ahead, but its significance is real. Rome has cut into Carthage's Spanish base, ensuring Hannibal cannot easily draw support from the rear. Historians still argue whether this victory truly limited Hannibal or whether his march was already beyond Iberian concerns, but the name Cissa stands as Rome's first taste of success in the new war. You see the clash unfold, dust rising as Roman maniples press forward, Iberian warriors fighting fiercely but breaking under steady discipline. The Scipio brothers push their lines hard, eager to prove that Rome can check Hannibal's advance, even at a distance. When the dust clears, the Romans hold the field, their banners snapping in the wind, their confidence momentarily restored. Yet Hannibal himself is already gone, driving his main army farther north, leaving Rome to fight shadows and rear guards while he plunges toward the Alps. In the chill evenings of Gaul, Hannibal's soldiers huddle around fires, their breath misting in the cold air. Supplies run short, tribes resist passage, but the commander presses on. His mind is fixed not on the discomfort of today, but on the shock of tomorrow, on the day Rome's allies in Italy will see Carthaginian banners unfurling on their soil. You imagine his scouts whispering of mountain passes, of snow and ice, of dangers greater than any battlefield. Yet Hannibal's determination burns brighter than doubt. The oath of his youth still drives him forward each step, a promise kept against the hated Republic. And so as Rome secures small victories like Cissa and breathes easier for a moment, the true danger approaches unseen. Hannibal is preparing the most daring maneuver of antiquity, a march that will become legend. You feel the mountains already looming ahead, their peaks white against the sky, waiting to test the will of men and beasts alike. The Second Punic War has only just begun, and already its shape bends toward awe and terror, carried by the ambition of one man who refuses to accept Rome's supremacy. The air grows thin as you climb with Hannibal's army into the looming shadow of the Alps. Snow glitters on the peaks, blinding under the pale autumn sun, while icy winds lash at faces and strip warmth from skin. It is 218 BC, and Hannibal has chosen the path that no Roman expects through the very mountains thought impassable for a host of men, horses, and elephants. The gamble is audacious, a march into myth. You feel the ground crunch beneath frozen boots, the breath of weary animals steaming in the cold, the echo of iron on rock as soldiers struggle upward. The journey begins in Gaul, where Hannibal secures passage with some tribes and fights others who resist. Gauls watch from cliffs, hurling stones and spears onto the columns below, their cries echoing like ghosts through the valleys. Hannibal responds with cunning, sending detachments to flank the attackers, clearing narrow paths, punishing betrayal with swift, brutal precision. The army presses forward, battered but unbroken. Historians still argue over which Alpine route Hannibal actually took, with theories ranging from the Col du Clapier to the Col du Montgenèvre. The debate lingers because the terrain itself offers no easy answers. Every pass is cruel, every descent treacherous. Day after day, the soldiers march, their numbers dwindling. Rockslides bury wagons, avalanches sweep men from ridges, frost claims those who falter. Elephants, magnificent and strange against the white landscape, stumble in the snow, their trunks curling in distress. You picture them silhouetted against jagged peaks, exotic beasts from Africa, struggling in a frozen world. A curious tidbit emerges from ancient accounts. Some elephants were said to be armored, their backs carrying wooden towers for archers. Though how many survived the climb remains uncertain. The image endures nonetheless, huge creatures forging a path where even mules might hesitate. Hannibal himself rides at the front, encouraging his men with a voice steady as the mountain wind. He points to the valleys beyond, promising fertile lands, allies ready to rise against Rome, victory waiting just over the next ridge. His soldiers, though exhausted, draw strength from his certainty. You sense their mixture of fear and awe, their belief that they follow not just a general, but a man favored by the gods. The oath, sworn in his youth, burns in every step, binding him to endure what lesser commanders would never attempt. Nights are the worst. Fires sputter in thin air, men huddle in cloaks, stiff with frost horses neigh in pain. Food dwindles, snow buries what little forage exists. The mountains become enemies themselves, silent, merciless, indifferent. Yet somehow the army pushes on. By the time they descend into Italy, Hannibal has lost nearly half his force. From the 90,000 who began, perhaps 20,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry remain gaunt but unbroken, hardened by trial. Historians still debate the exact numbers, but the lesson is clear: survival itself was victory. When the soldiers finally reach the Po Valley, the air warms, the rivers flow, and green fields stretch before them. The men weep with relief, falling to the earth, kissing the soil of Italy. You can almost hear their ragged laughter, the sound of life reclaimed. The elephants, astonishingly, still march, fewer now, but alive, their massive forms, striking terror into the Italian tribes, who behold them for the first time. Word spreads swiftly: Hannibal has crossed the Alps. The impossible has been done. In Rome, the Senate reels at the news. Never did they imagine that an enemy army, let alone one with elephants, would descend upon their northern plains. Panic ripples outward, alliances feel shaky. Citizens whisper of omens, generals scramble to respond. Yet Hannibal wastes no time. He rallies Gallic tribes, eager to throw off Roman rule, swelling his ranks with new warriors. The invasion is not just military, it is political, aimed at cracking Rome's network of allies, the foundation of its strength. You pause to take in the scale of what has happened. No commander had ever attempted such a march, and few ever would again. Hannibal's feat becomes legend almost immediately, his name whispered with awe, even among enemies. The Alps, once seen as a natural wall protecting Rome, have been breached, their sanctity shattered. Curiously, later generations will argue over whether Hannibal's crossing was more miraculous for its daring or disastrous for its losses. Yet the truth lies in the simple fact that his army stands in Italy, ready to fight. As the sun sets over the Po Valley, you see Hannibal's campfires flicker across the plain. His soldiers rest, their bodies battered, but their spirits sharpened. The elephants sway silently in the dusk shadows of giants among men. Ahead lies a series of battles that will shake Rome to its core, Ticinus, Trebia, and beyond. The Alps lie behind them, now conquered by will and endurance. And you, breathing the cool Italian night, sense that the real struggle is only beginning as Hannibal prepares to test Rome on its own soil with the fury of a man bound by oath and by destiny. You stand on the banks of the river Ticinus, its waters glinting under a low winter sun, the plain stretching wide on either side. It is late 218 BC, and Hannibal has barely descended from the Alps, his men still raw from frost and hunger, when the first true clash with Rome takes shape. Across the river, the consul Publius Cornelius Scipio has arrived with a Roman force eager to check the invader before he can rally allies. The battle that follows is small by later standards, but it carries echoes of fate, for here, young Scipio Africanus, not yet famous, saves his father's life in a cavalry melee that foreshadows the destiny waiting years ahead. You picture the two armies arraying themselves. Hannibal, knowing his infantry is still recovering, chooses to fight with cavalry. His Numidians, light horsemen, swift as shadows, ride bareback, with javelins in hand, their speed unmatched. His heavy Iberian and Gallic cavalry, broad-shouldered and fierce, take position alongside them, forming a mobile force of deadly skill. Rome, unused to facing such riders, fields its own cavalry under Scipio, but relies heavily on discipline rather than experience. The air is tense, horses stamping steam rising from nostrils in the cold morning. At the signal, hooves thunder across the field. The ground shakes beneath the charge dust, kicking up despite the damp air. Hannibal's horsemen crash into the Roman line with savage momentum, javelins, whistling, swords flashing. The Romans try to hold formation, but they are outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The Numidians circle, darting in and out, harassing the flanks, while Gallic cavalry drive headlong into the center. In minutes, the Roman cavalry begins to falter, pushed back toward the river's edge. Amid the chaos, Publius Scipio himself is struck wounded by a javelin. His horse stumbles, and for a moment it seems the consul will fall into enemy hands. Then a daring act unfolds. His son, barely 17 years old, charges through the melee. With remarkable courage, the boy cuts a path to his father, shields him from blows, and carries him to safety. Ancient writers preserve this moment as a sign of destiny, that the youth who would one day defeat Hannibal at Zama first met him here on the field of Ticinus, in blood and smoke. Historians still argue over how much of this story is fact and how much later legend, but the scene glows in memory all the same. The Romans withdraw their cavalry, battered, their consul injured. Hannibal claims the field, his riders victorious, his reputation spreading like wildfire through northern Italy. To the Gallic tribes watching from the hills, the message is clear: Rome is not invincible. Many tribes, long resentful of Roman control, now drift toward Hannibal's banner, swelling his ranks. You can almost hear their war cries in a dozen dialects echoing across the plains. A curious tidbit emerges. Some sources say Hannibal treated wounded Roman prisoners with surprising mercy, sending them home to spread word of his strength and generosity. Whether this was genuine compassion or clever propaganda, it worked. Stories of his magnanimity spread, and Italian allies began to waver in their loyalty to Rome. Hannibal was not just fighting with swords, he was fighting for hearts and allegiances. For Rome, the defeat at Ticinus is a shock, but not yet despair. Scipio, though wounded, survives, and his determination hardens. He warns the Senate that Hannibal is no ordinary enemy, that this war will be unlike any Rome has fought before. The Senate responds by ordering both consuls to combine their forces, hoping that together they can crush Hannibal swiftly. But you sense already that speed is on Hannibal's side, and that Rome's strength, so often reliable, will be tested in new and terrible ways. As dusk falls, you see the plain littered with broken lances, horses limping, the river flowing quietly, as if unaware of the blood spilled on its banks. Hannibal's cavalry gather in camp, their victory songs drifting into the night. Rome has felt its first sting on Italian soil, and though the wound is small, it cuts deep into pride. And there, in the shadows of the camp, a wounded consul tends his injuries, while his son, still more boy than man, stares into the darkness, perhaps already imagining the day when destiny will bring him face to face with Hannibal again. The battle of Ticinus is over, but it is only a beginning. You sense the momentum building, the drumbeat of history quickening. Soon greater battles will follow, where rivers freeze and armies vanish into traps. Hannibal has announced his presence in Italy, and Rome will never look at its northern plains the same way again. The winter air stings your lungs as you follow Hannibal's army southward, the rivers of northern Italy running cold and fast in the pale sun. It is December of 218 BC, and the Carthaginian commander, fresh from his victory at Ticinus, now faces the combined consular forces of Rome at the river Trebia. Snow lies on the ground in patches, the grass stiff with frost, and icy winds cut across the plain. Soldiers shiver in thin cloaks, their bellies aching with hunger, their bodies weary from forced marches. Yet amid this misery, Hannibal prepares one of his greatest tactical masterpieces, an ambush that will etch his name even deeper into history. The Roman consul, Tiberius Sempronius Longus, commands the legions here. Bold, eager for glory, he burns to engage Hannibal quickly, especially after hearing of the setback at Ticinus. His co-consul, Publius Scipio, still recovering from his wounds, counsels caution, warning that Hannibal is too clever to face rashly, but impatience wins. Sempronius longs for a decisive battle to restore Roman pride, and Hannibal is more than ready to give him one. Historians still argue whether Sempronius was driven by political ambition, military arrogance, or simple miscalculation, but his haste will prove costly. Hannibal studies the landscape carefully. The Trebia runs wide and frigid, swollen from winter rains. He knows the Romans must cross it to reach him. Beyond the river, a stretch of flat ground lies open, flanked by reeds and a hidden ravine. There, under cover of night, Hannibal places a detachment of 2,000 men, Libyan spearmen, and Gallic warriors under his brother Mago. Concealed in frost-bitten brush, they lie in wait, ready to spring like wolves on unsuspecting prey. Morning dawns harsh and cold. Hannibal sends his Numidian cavalry to harass the Roman camp. They ride close, hurling javelins, then retreat, taunting and daring pursuit. Sempronius takes the bait. Eager to strike, he orders his entire army forward, driving them across the icy Trebia in the early hours. You can almost feel the shock of the freezing water as legionaries wade waist-deep, their armor weighing them down their limbs, stiffening with every step. By the time they reach the far bank, their bodies are numb, their breath steaming, their energy already drained. Hannibal's troops wait in readiness. His heavy infantry, Libyans, Iberians, and Gauls, stand in the center shields gleaming under a thin sun. On the wings, his cavalry and elephants prepare to encircle. The Romans, wet and weary, form their battle lines and march forward, unaware of the trap closing around them. The clash is brutal. Shields crash, swords flash, spears splinter in the cold air. Roman discipline is fierce. They press against Hannibal's center, pushing it back step by step. For a moment it seems as though sheer Roman grit might carry the day. But then Hannibal's cavalry sweep around the flanks, cutting off support, driving the Roman horsemen into flight. The elephants charge massive and terrifying, scattering soldiers who slip on the frozen ground. Panic ripples through the legions as Hannibal's hidden force under Mago bursts from the ravine, striking the Romans from behind. The trap slams shut. Imagine the chaos, shouts muffled by the roar of elephants' men slipping in mud and ice javelins raining from all sides. The Trebia's waters run red as fleeing soldiers attempt to swim back across, many drowning in the icy current. Whole units are surrounded, cut to pieces. Of the 40,000 Romans who entered the field, fewer than half escape with their lives. It is a disaster of chilling scale. A curious tidbit: some accounts say Hannibal ordered his men to spare the Roman allied Gauls, releasing them after capture, while treating Roman citizens harshly. This clever move sowed doubt among Italy's subject peoples, encouraging defections and weakening Rome's alliances. Hannibal's war was always as much about politics as about battle. As night falls, the Carthaginian camp glows with firelight, victory songs echoing against the frozen river. Hannibal has struck another devastating blow, not only breaking Roman armies but also shattering their aura of invincibility. His soldiers, though cold and hungry, are emboldened by triumph, convinced that the gods favor them. Rome meanwhile reels. News of the defeat spreads like wildfire, shaking confidence in the Senate and alarming allies across the peninsula. Historians still debate whether Sempronius's rashness alone caused the defeat, or whether Rome's rigid methods simply could not match Hannibal's genius. Perhaps it was both Roman pride walking headlong into Carthaginian cunning. What is certain is that the Trebia stands as a lesson in patience, deception, and the danger of underestimating an enemy who thinks like no one else. You step away from the battlefield, hearing the crack of ice on the river and the low moans of the wounded carried by the current. Rome has suffered its first major defeat in Italy, and worse will follow. Yet even now you sense something deeper in the Republic's spirit, an unwillingness to surrender, a resilience born of discipline and tradition. The war is far from over, but Hannibal's legend has begun to burn brightly, a flame Rome cannot yet extinguish. The cold mists of the Trebia still hang in the air when you find yourself carried forward in time into the furnace of summer 216 BC. The ground beneath your feet is dry and dusty, the fields stretching wide and flat near the town of Cannae in southern Italy. Cicadas buzz in the heat, and a hot wind stirs the barley. Here, Hannibal will deliver not just another victory, but one of the greatest tactical masterpieces in all of history. The battle that follows will sear itself into Rome's memory as a wound that never fully heals. In the years since Trebia, Hannibal has marched relentlessly through Italy, winning allies, defeating Roman legions, and shaking the Republic's confidence. At Lake Trasimene, he lured another Roman army into a deadly trap, annihilating them in an ambush where fog and hills concealed his forces. Now, with Rome desperate to crush him, the Senate assembles the largest force the Republic has ever raised, perhaps 80,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry, nearly twice Hannibal's numbers. You can hear the rumble of their march dust rising like storm clouds as they converge on Cannae. The consuls for this year, Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro, command in alternation. Paulus favors caution, Varro boldness. It is Varro's turn on this day, and he orders battle. Historians still argue whether his decision was rash ambition or necessary confidence, but the choice seals Rome's fate. Hannibal, calm and deliberate, prepares to meet the might of the Republic with guile instead of brute force. He arranges his army in a crescent formation, Gauls and Iberians in the center, Libyan heavy infantry, on the flanks cavalry poised on the wings. The Romans, confident in their numbers, mass their infantry deep and dense like a hammer meant to smash through any obstacle. The hot wind whips across the plain, carrying grit into eyes and throats. Tension mounts a silence heavy before the roar. At the signal, the Romans surge forward, pressing into Hannibal's center. The crescent bends back step by step, giving the illusion of collapse. Gauls and Iberians fight fiercely, retreating in controlled rhythm, drawing the Romans deeper into the trap. Dust rises thick, cloaking the field, muffling the cries of the dying. You can almost feel the press of bodies, the suffocating crush, as tens of thousands push forward into narrowing space. Then the flanks turn. Hannibal's Libyan infantry, fresh and disciplined, wheel inward, striking at the exposed Roman sides. At the same time, his cavalry, having routed their Roman counterparts, sweep in from behind. The trap closes like a tightening noose. The great Roman army, once so confident, finds itself encircled on all sides, packed so tightly that soldiers cannot raise their arms to strike. Panic spreads, cries turn to screams, the sun beats down mercilessly. The slaughter begins. Legionaries fall in heaps, trampled, suffocated, cut down. Estimates vary, but perhaps 50,000 Romans die that day, the flower of the Republic's manpower gone in a single, shattering blow. Among them are senators, consuls, and experienced commanders. Rome's very leadership gutted. A curious tidbit preserved in ancient accounts tells that the ground was so thick with bodies that streams nearby ran red, carrying the memory of defeat downstream for days. Only a fraction escaped, slipping through gaps or fleeing with the remnants of the cavalry. For Rome, Cannae is not merely a defeat, it is annihilation. Never before has the Republic suffered such loss. Never again will it face destruction so near. Hannibal, standing amid the carnage, has achieved what seemed impossible. He has humbled Rome at the height of its power, broken its armies in the open field. Historians still argue why he did not march on the city itself afterward. Some say his army was too weary, others that he lacked siege equipment, others still that he knew Rome's spirit would not yield to fear alone. Whatever the reason, Rome survives, wounded but alive. Back in the city, grief and panic mingle. Families wail in the streets, temples overflow with sacrifices, senators steel themselves against despair. Yet amid the mourning, a fierce determination hardens. Rome refuses to negotiate, refuses to surrender. Allies waver, but the Republic rallies. Fabius Maximus, the cautious delayer, is vindicated in his strategy of avoiding open battle. New levies are called, even slaves promised freedom if they will fight. Out of tragedy, resilience blooms. As you stand on the field of Cannae, you feel the weight of silence after chaos. Broken shields lie scattered the air, thick with dust and the faint scent of blood. Vultures wheel in the sky. Hannibal has won glory eternal, but Rome has shown something equally enduring: the will to rise again, even when brought to the brink of annihilation. This, too, is part of the Punic Wars story, that victory in battle is not always victory in war. The sun over Cannae fades into memory, and now you walk through the uneasy silence that follows Rome's darkest day. The Republic has lost tens of thousands, its armies shattered, its pride humbled. Yet as you drift through the streets of Rome, you do not hear the groan of surrender. Instead, you hear the murmurs of resilience. Mothers mourn, yes, fathers weep, but beneath the grief beats a stubborn pulse. Rome refuses to bow. The Senate convenes not to beg for peace, but to demand more recruits, more sacrifices, more endurance. In the curious senators speak with voices hoarse from grief, but steady with resolve. Some urge negotiation, but most cry out that Rome must fight on. Envoys from Hannibal approach with offers of peace, but they are dismissed. The Republic, even bleeding, refuses to parley with an invader. A curious tidbit preserved in ancient sources says that when Hannibal offered to ransom prisoners after Cannae, the Senate refused, declaring that no citizen of Rome should be bought back from the enemy. They would either escape or die, but never be purchased. It was a harsh decree, yet it hardened the spirit of resistance. Across Italy, allies tremble. Cities like Capua, once loyal, now swing to Hannibal's side, convinced Rome is finished. Others hesitate, waiting to see which way the storm will break. Hannibal's victories are not only military, they are political earthquakes, shaking the network of alliances that has bound the peninsula to Rome. If enough allies defect, the Republic could crumble. Hannibal knows this, and marches south, courting cities with promises of freedom. You can almost hear his speeches in foreign tongues, offering liberty where Rome had imposed command. Rome responds with caution. The Senate grants extraordinary powers to Quintus Fabius Maximus, whose strategy had once seemed cowardly. Known as the Delayer, Fabius avoids pitched battles, shadowing Hannibal's army, harassing supply lines, denying him the decisive confrontation he craves. Soldiers grumble at the lack of glory, citizens mock his hesitance, yet his patience keeps Rome alive. Historians still argue whether Fabius saved the Republic or merely bought time, but his tactics prove that avoiding disaster is sometimes the highest form of victory. Meanwhile, Hannibal marches through Italy unchecked but not unchallenged. His army feasts on Roman storehouses, but each mile takes him farther from Carthage, deeper into hostile territory. Supplies grow scarce, allies fewer than hoped. The elephants, once symbols of awe, dwindle unsuited to Italian winters and roads. Still his cavalry dominates the plains, his infantry unbeaten in open battle. He becomes a spectre, haunting Rome, his campfires glowing on distant hills, his presence forcing constant fear. The strain touches daily life. You picture Roman families offering sacrifices to Jupiter, farmers clutching plows with trembling hands, children asking when the invader will come. Roads once safe now echo with the sound of raiding parties, and fields lie untended. Yet Rome's machine grinds on. New legions are raised from every corner, boys drafted, younger veterans called older. Even slaves are promised freedom if they take up arms. The Republic transforms grief into steel. Curiously, at the same time, Rome expands elsewhere. In Sicily, they fight to hold the island. In Spain, the Scipio brothers lead campaigns to cut off Carthage's resources. The war is no longer just in Italy, it is everywhere, a web of struggles stretching from the Alps to Africa. Hannibal may stride across the peninsula, but Rome is learning to fight on multiple fronts, refusing to let one disaster end the larger war. You feel the tension mounting like the pull of a bowstring. Rome endures, but the pressure is immense. Hannibal prowls, but his net of allies is not as wide as he hoped. The Republic and its enemy are locked in a stalemate of endurance, each testing the other's will. Historians still argue whether Hannibal missed his chance by not marching directly on Rome after Cannae, or whether the city would have resisted to the last. The answer remains uncertain, but the question lingers like a shadow. As night settles over Italy, you see fires glowing in two directions in Hannibal's camp, where soldiers boast of victories and dream of Rome's downfall, and in Rome's streets where citizens huddle around lamps, whispering prayers, refusing despair. Two flames burn across the land, one of conquest, one of defiance. and you, breathing the cool air, realize that the Punic Wars are no longer just battles, they are struggles of character, where pride, patience, and perseverance will decide which city commands the Mediterranean. The embers of Rome's defiance glow steady as your thoughts drift westward across the Mediterranean to the rocky hills and silver-veined rivers of Spain. It is here in Iberia that a young Roman commander begins to rise, a man who will one day meet Hannibal in the final reckoning. His name is Publius Cornelius Scipio, later called Africanus, and in these years he is not yet the legendary conqueror, but a bold, untested leader learning the art of war in Hannibal's shadow. After Hannibal's departure for Italy, Carthage's power in Spain remains strong, anchored by its generals and fortified cities. The Scipio brothers, Gnaeus and Publius the Elder, are sent to cut Carthage's lifeline, hoping to choke Hannibal's supply of silver and men. For a time, they succeed, harrying Carthaginian garrisons, winning over Iberian tribes and seizing stretches of land. But fortune turns cruel. In 211 BC, both brothers fall in battle, their armies broken, their ambitions buried in Spanish soil. Rome reels at the loss, fearing that Carthage's grip will tighten once more. Into this vacuum steps the younger Scipio, barely 24, elected by desperate soldiers to take command. You picture him standing before the legions, his youth a stark contrast to the grizzled veterans he now leads, yet his voice is steady, his gaze sharp. He speaks of destiny, of Rome's resilience, of vengeance for his father and uncle. His men listen, skeptical at first, then moved by his fire. In this moment, the seed of legend takes root. Historians still argue whether his election was purely political, born of necessity, or whether charisma alone swept him into power. Either way, the soldiers follow. Scipio proves himself quickly. He studies Hannibal's methods with care, learning not just from Rome's defeats, but from Carthage's brilliance. Flexibility, cunning, surprise, these become his tools, blending with Roman discipline. A curious tidbit: ancient writers say Scipio claimed to be guided by dreams, that divine visions promised him victory and inspired his soldiers. Whether mystical truth or clever theatre, it worked. His men believed the gods favored him, and belief itself became a weapon. His first great stroke is the capture of Carthago Nova in 209 BC. At dawn, as the tide falls, Scipio sends troops wading through shallow lagoons, storming the city from an unexpected direction. The defenders, caught off guard, crumble. Within hours, Rome holds Carthage's Spanish capital, along with vast treasure, hostages, and supplies. The victory electrifies Rome, proving that fortune still smiles on the Republic. Scipio rewards captured hostages with respect, treating Iberian leaders with dignity instead of scorn. Slowly, tribes turn to his side, swayed not just by strength, but by honor. From Carthago Nova, Scipio campaigns, relentlessly striking Carthaginian strongholds, cutting Hannibal's lifeline piece by piece. His legions grow hardened, his reputation soaring. Word spreads back to Rome of a commander unlike any other, daring, intelligent, charismatic. You imagine the whispers in the Senate, some cautious, fearing his rising star, others hopeful, sensing he may be the one to counter Hannibal's shadow. Carthaginian generals, too, recognize the threat. Hasdrubal, Barca, Hannibal's brother, rallies forces to reinforce Italy, planning to cross into Gaul and join Hannibal. For a moment, the danger is immense. If the brothers unite their armies, Rome could be crushed between them. Yet Scipio moves to block. In 208 BC, at the Battle of Baecula, he strikes Hasdrubal's camp, forcing him to retreat. Though Hasdrubal escapes, the victory boosts Roman morale and further cements Scipio's reputation. Still, the war in Spain drags on, fierce and uncertain. Tribes shift loyalties, battles flare and fade, and both sides bleed resources. Yet Scipio continues to grow not only in skill but in vision. He sees beyond immediate campaigns, imagining not just holding Rome's ground but carrying the war into Carthage's heartland. Such daring thoughts would have seemed reckless years before, but now, in the wake of endless defeats, Rome begins to crave boldness. Historians debate whether Scipio consciously modelled himself on Hannibal, adopting his enemy's tactics, or whether the similarities arose from necessity. What is clear is that by fighting in Spain, Scipio gained the experience, allies, and confidence that would one day carry him to Africa. And you, standing on Iberian soil, feel the tension building across the sea. Hannibal still roams Italy undefeated in open battle, while in Spain his future nemesis sharpens his sword, learning each lesson carved by loss and won by daring. As night settles over Carthago Nova, the Roman camp hums with quiet confidence. Soldiers rest with full bellies from captured stores, their armor polished by firelight. Scipio walks among them, his presence calm yet electric, a reminder that leaders are not always born in triumph, but forged in the fires of desperation. You sense how the balance of the war is shifting. The boy who once saved his father's life at Ticinus has become a commander who can carry Rome's hope. The paths of Scipio and Hannibal set long ago are now bending inevitably toward collision. You stand now on the broad plains of North Africa, the smell of dust and salt carried inland from the sea. The year is 202 BC, and two figures stride toward destiny: Hannibal Barca, the veteran of decades of war, and Publius Cornelius Scipio, the young Roman who has learned from every scar and every loss of his people. Their armies face each other near a town called Zama, and you sense that this is no ordinary battle. It is the climax of years of hatred, endurance, and cunning, the moment that will decide who commands the Mediterranean. Hannibal has returned from Italy at last, summoned home after Scipio's bold invasion of Africa. He carries the weight of 20 years of struggle victories, unmatched but never decisive enough to break Rome's will. His hair is greyer, his body leaner, but his presence still commands awe. Veterans who marched with him across the Alps gather at his side alongside new recruits raised hastily from Carthage's remaining strength. Elephants, once symbols of his audacity, stand ready again, though fewer than in years past. Scipio, too, has transformed. He is no longer the youth who saved his father at Ticinus, no longer just the daring general who seized Carthago Nova. He is now consul entrusted with Rome's survival, bringing the fight to Carthage itself. His legions are seasoned from campaigns in Spain and Africa, disciplined yet flexible, drilled in tactics shaped by studying Hannibal's very methods. A curious tidbit: some accounts suggest Scipio and Hannibal met in person before the battle, parleying privately. Ancient writers describe them speaking as equals, two great minds acknowledging one another's brilliance, even as they prepared to destroy each other. Historians still argue whether this meeting truly happened, but the image lingers like a whisper of respect amid the roar of war. The battlefield stretches wide and open, the soil dry and hard underfoot. Hannibal places his elephants in the vanguard, hoping to smash through Roman lines, followed by layers of infantry mercenaries in front Carthaginian citizens, behind veterans of Italy in reserve. His cavalry, however, is outmatched. Scipio has Numidian horsemen, once Hannibal's allies, now riding for Rome under King Messina. This defection tips the balance before swords even clash. The morning begins with a thunder of hooves and the trumpet calls of elephants. The great beasts surge forward, tusks, gleaming ears flapping. But Scipio has prepared. He orders lanes opened in the Roman formation, wide corridors through which the elephants charge harmlessly. Trumpets blare, soldiers shout, and many of the animals panic, veering aside or trampling their own ranks. The trap Hannibal once used to terrify Rome now falters against adaptation. Then the infantry collide. Hannibal's mercenaries hurl themselves at the Roman front, fierce and reckless. Blades crash, shields grind, dust rises. The Romans push steadily, their discipline holding firm. Behind the mercenaries, Carthaginian citizens advance reluctantly, the lines buckling with uneven will. Finally, Hannibal's veterans, his hardened survivors of years in Italy, step forward, their eyes cold, their movements sure. The battle sways back and forth, exhaustion clawing at every man. It is the cavalry that decides the day. Massinisa's Numidians and Scipio's Roman horse drive Hannibal's cavalry from the field, then circle back to strike the Carthaginian rear. Surrounded on three sides, Hannibal's army begins to collapse. The veterans fight with grim resolve, but numbers and momentum overwhelm them. You can almost hear the cries of despair, the clash of steel fading as lines disintegrate. By dusk, the outcome is undeniable. Hannibal withdraws, defeated at last. Carthage sues for peace, forced to surrender its fleet, pay crushing indemnities, and give up its empire beyond Africa. The Second Punic War ends, and Rome emerges not just as victor, but as master of the Mediterranean world. Historians debate endlessly why Hannibal lost, whether it was betrayal by allies, exhaustion of resources, or simply Scipio's brilliance. Perhaps it was all of these. What matters is that here at Zama, Rome's resilience meets Carthage's genius, and resilience prevails. You step back and see the wider picture. The First Punic War taught Rome to master the seas. The Second Punic War taught Rome to endure disaster without yielding. Together they transformed the Republic into something greater than itself, an empire in all but name. Carthage, once proud and far-reaching, now shrinks into memory. Its wings clipped, its people bowed. Yet Hannibal's legend will never fade. He has shown the world what audacity and brilliance can achieve, even against the mightiest foe. As night falls over Zama, you see the battlefield strewn with broken shields and abandoned elephants, the air heavy with dust and silence. In the distance, campfires glow on both sides, Rome celebrating Carthage morning. And you, drifting in the quiet, feel the story settling into your mind like a stone in deep water. One chapter has closed, but the struggle is not finished. The Punic Wars are not yet over, and Carthage's ashes still hold embers that Rome cannot ignore. The dust of Zama still clings to your sandals as you drift forward in time. Hannibal has sailed back to Carthage, his dream, broken his city, forced to bend under Rome's stern peace. Yet the years after the Second Punic War are not quiet years of healing. They are years of uneasy calm of Carthage, rebuilding cautiously of Rome, watching warily like a wolf circling a wounded rival. Carthage, stripped of its empire, loses Spain its fleet and its right to wage war without Roman permission. It must pay enormous indemnities, silver draining from its treasury year after year. Yet surprisingly, the city begins to prosper again. Trade still flows across the harbours, merchants still bargain, farmers still plough the fertile fields of Africa. Within a generation, Carthage regains wealth, though not power. The markets hum with life ships return to sea, not as war galleys, but as cargo vessels carrying goods once more. A curious tidbit emerges. Roman merchants themselves begin to trade with Carthage, profiting from the very rival they once swore to destroy. Business, it seems, flows even where politics bristle. Hannibal, ever restless, does not fade quietly into history. For a time he serves as suffect, a magistrate in Carthage, reforming taxes and curbing corruption. He strengthens the city's finances so effectively that Rome grows nervous again, suspicious that prosperity will lead to defiance. Pressured by Rome's demands, Hannibal eventually flees into exile, wandering from court to court, Syria, Bithynia, offering his talents to kings hostile to Rome. Historians still argue whether Rome pursued him relentlessly out of fear or vengeance, but his shadow lingers across the Mediterranean until his death. Meanwhile, Rome expands with relentless confidence. Victories over Macedon and the Greek states confirm its dominance, not just in the west, but now in the east as well. Veterans return from foreign campaigns, bringing stories of strange lands and rich spoils. Roads stretch farther, colonies of planted allies bound more tightly. Rome, once humbled at Trebia Trasimene and Cannae, now carries itself as master of the known world. Yet in the Senate, voices whisper uneasily about Carthage's recovery. Grain from its fertile fields pours into markets filling warehouses. Merchants grow wealthy again, temples shine with new offerings, and the city's walls are repaired. To some Romans this looks like resilience, to others like defiance. The memory of Hannibal's elephants in Italy is not so easily erased. Allies who once betrayed Rome still dwell in the Republic's mind like scars. One senator's voice grows louder than the rest, Cato the elder. Stern, unyielding, he ends every speech, no matter the topic, with the same refrain: Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed. It becomes a mantra echoing through the forum, a drumbeat of fear and hatred. You can almost hear the repetition like a hammer striking stone, shaping opinion, until Rome sees Carthage not as a neighbor, but as an unfinished enemy. Still not all agree. Some senators argue for restraint, noting that Carthage has kept its treaty, that peace is profitable, that Rome should not spill blood needlessly. Historians still debate whether Rome's eventual aggression was driven by genuine fear or by greed for Africa's wealth. The arguments feel eerily familiar even to modern ears: security against prosperity, suspicion against cooperation. In Carthage itself, ordinary life continues. Children play in the streets, ships sail, farmers harvest, yet the people feel Rome's gaze heavy upon them like a hawk circling overhead. They know their fate is no longer entirely their own. And in quiet moments perhaps they wonder whether their renewed prosperity is a blessing or a curse, for wealth makes them strong, but strength makes Rome suspicious. As you walk through the harbour at twilight, the air filled with the smell of salt and tar, you hear the hum of trade and the clink of coins, but also the murmur of unease. Carthage is alive, but it lives under a shadow. Rome, triumphant yet restless, cannot forget the terror of Hannibal. The wars seem ended, yet in truth the story feels unfinished. The embers of rivalry still glow, waiting for the wind of suspicion to fan them into flame once more. The twilight over Carthage deepens as your attention shifts to Rome, where the Senate chambers echo with debate. It is the mid-2nd century BC, and the Republic has grown vast since Zama. Legions march in Greece and Asia, wealth flows into the Forum, and Rome's allies tremble more than they speak. Yet amid this triumph, one refrain grows louder, repeated like a ritual, by a stern old man: Carthago, delenda est Carthage must be destroyed. The voice belongs to Cato the Elder, a senator of austere habits and iron convictions. He distrusts luxury, fears softness, and despises rivals. Each time he finishes a speech, whether on grain prices, military levies, or even minor disputes, he ends with the same words: Carthage must fall. A curious tidbit says he once plucked a ripe fig during a speech, held it aloft, and declared it had been picked in Carthage only 3 days before. The fruit fresh in his hand proved how close the enemy still was, how swiftly danger could reach Rome. Senators stared at the fig and felt the warning settle deep. Not all share his obsession. Many senators point out that Carthage has kept its treaty faithfully since Zama, that it has no fleet, no empire, no standing army. Trade flows smoothly. Roman merchants profit from African grain and Carthaginian wares. Peace, they argue, enriches both sides. Historians still argue whether Rome's final turn toward war was born of genuine fear that Carthage might rise again, or of envy for its restored prosperity. Perhaps it was both fear disguised as prudence, greed cloaked in vigilance. Meanwhile, Carthage prospers quietly. Its merchants rebuild fortunes, its fields once again yield rich harvests, markets hum with life temples, gleam with offerings, harbours echo with the creak of ropes and the splash of oars. To walk here at dusk is to hear laughter and trade, not the tramp of armies. Yet beneath the prosperity lies anxiety, for everyone knows Rome's gaze never wavers. Each coin counted feels like it might someday be used as evidence of strength, each repaired wall as proof of rebellion. Rome, too, grows restless. Victories abroad swell its pride, but memories of Hannibal linger like scars. Senators recall Cannae's slaughter, the panic of refugees, the near collapse of allies. They imagine Carthage as a lurking shadow patient waiting. Even in victory, Rome cannot forget its moment of vulnerability. And so, suspicion festers, nourished by Cato's relentless words, until Carthage's very existence feels intolerable. Curiously, some Roman generals and statesmen still seek moderation. They argue that Carthage is a valuable partner, that forcing it down may destabilize Africa, that Rome should not make enemies where it has friends. But their voices weaken year by year, drowned beneath the drumbeat of fear. Carthage must be destroyed. It becomes less a policy than a destiny, a mantra repeated until it feels inevitable. You walk through the Forum in your imagination, hearing the murmur of senators debating merchants, shouting prices, priests chanting prayers. Among the noise, Cato's voice rises once more, sharp as steel. Carthage must fall. The words hang in the air, carried on the wind, whispered in taverns, taught to children, repeated like prophecy. In Carthage, across the sea, the people sense the change. They hear Rome's mutterings, catch whispers of suspicion. Some urge caution, others argue for strength. Do they disarm further, hoping to ease Roman fears, or do they prepare secretly, knowing that trust in Rome is folly? The city stands at a crossroads, proud, yet wary, prosperous, yet fragile. As night falls, you pictured two cities, staring at one another across the waters, Rome in its marble confidence, Carthage in its restored vibrancy. Between them lies the memory of Hannibal and the echo of battles fought. The Punic Wars feel finished, yet the air thickens with unease, and in the Senate Cato's refrain grows louder still, a steady pulse of warning that beats like a war drum in the ears of history. The steady drumbeat of Cato's words grows louder until at last they become action. The year is 149 BC, and the uneasy peace between Rome and Carthage snaps like a taut rope under too much strain. Tension has been building for years, sharpened by disputes between Carthage and Numidia, Rome's favoured ally in Africa. Numidian raids cut into Carthaginian land, and when Carthage dares to fight back without Roman permission, the Senate seizes its chance. Rome declares war. The Third Punic War begins. You stand on the docks of Carthage as the news arrives. Panic ripples through the crowd. Merchants drop ledgers, farmers leave their goods untended, mothers clutch children tighter. For all their prosperity, Carthaginians know they have no fleet, no empire, and no allies strong enough to protect them. Rome has come not to negotiate, but to annihilate. You hear the whispering fear. This is not war for honor or territory. This is war for existence. The Roman fleet darkens the horizon, sails like storm clouds blotting out the sky. Legions pour onto African soil, disciplined and relentless. Carthage scrambles to prepare. Citizens who have not seen battle in decades are armed. Women cut their hair to twist into ropes for catapults. Even slaves are promised freedom if they will fight. The city, proud and wealthy, braces itself like a cornered lion. A curious tidbit: when Rome first demanded Carthage surrender, Carthaginian leaders complied, handing over weapons, hostages, even ships. But then Rome made its true demand: abandon the city itself, move inland and rebuild away from the sea. That order was too much. The people erupted, refusing to leave the home of their ancestors, the harbours that fed their trade, the temples where their gods dwelled. They chose to resist, even if resistance meant doom. So the siege begins. Roman camps encircle Carthage, lines of earthworks and ditches, cutting the city off from the world. Carthaginian defenders man the walls, hurling stones and arrows, repairing breaches by torchlight. Nights glow with fire as sorties erupt, citizens charging out, desperate to burn Roman engines to push back the siege. The clash of iron echoes across the plains, but the walls hold. The city turns inward, food grows scarce, hunger gnaws at bellies. Families grind old grain into thin paste, animals vanish into cooking pots, and desperate measures creep in. Yet the spirit remains unbroken. Historians still argue whether Carthage might have survived longer with more allies, or whether Rome's might made defeat inevitable. What is certain is that courage blazed brightly within those walls. Men and women alike became soldiers, forging spears from household tools, melting ornaments into weapons. Rome too feels the strain. The siege drags on, battles costly, progress slow. Legions falter against the high walls, storms batter supply lines. In time, a new commander takes charge, Scipio Aemilianus, grandson by adoption of Scipio Africanus. Under his stern leadership, discipline tightens, strategy sharpens. He is patient, methodical, unwilling to let pride rush him into mistakes. Step by step, he closes the grip around Carthage, strangling the city inch by inch. As you drift through the besieged streets in your mind, You hear the cries of hungry children, the clang of blacksmiths forging weapons, from scraps the whispered prayers to Baal Hammon and Tanit. Yet you also feel the fierce pride, the refusal to abandon their home, the belief that better to fall in fire than live in chains. By the second year of siege, the struggle becomes unbearable. The walls bear scars of endless assaults, the harbours are sealed, the people thin and hollow-eyed. Still they fight, every stone and alley turned into a fortress. You sense the inevitability pressing in, yet you also feel admiration for the defiance of a city that chooses dignity even in destruction. Night falls over the battlefield, fires flickering on both sides. Roman camps buzz with confidence. Carthaginian walls glow with determination. Between them lies silence, heavy with fate. The Third Punic War has begun, and you, listening now, know in your heart that this is the final act, that one of these cities will emerge ascendant and the other will be erased. The years of siege grind on, and now you find yourself walking the battered streets of Carthage in 146 BC. Smoke curls from ruined roofs, walls groan under the strain of endless assaults, and hunger has carved hollows in every face. The once prosperous city markets, full harbours, crowded temples gleaming, now clings to life in desperation. Yet even now, with Rome's grip tightening, Carthage does not yield. The people fight with a ferocity born not of hope, but of the knowledge that surrender means obliteration. The Romans under Scipio Aemilianus closed their fist. He orders his legions forward methodically, battering walls with rams, hurling stones with catapults, cutting off every route of supply. You hear the rhythm of picks and hammers, the grind of siege engines, moving across scorched earth. Slowly, inexorably, breaches tear open in Carthage's mighty defences. The final assault begins. Roman soldiers storm through shattered gates, their shields raise their pila, flashing in the smoky dawn. Carthaginian defenders meet them in narrow alleys, hurling tiles from rooftops, lunging from doorways with makeshift spears. Every street becomes a battleground, every house a fortress. Women and children fight beside men, the city itself screaming in defiance. Historians still argue whether the ferocity of this defense was desperation alone or an unshakable cultural pride that refused humiliation. Either way, the struggle is remembered as a storm of chaos, as though the walls themselves bled. A curious tidbit surfaces in the chaos. Some Roman accounts describe Carthaginian citizens retreating into the temple of Eschamun, a sanctuary on the Byrsa hill where flames eventually consumed them. Whether legend or truth, the image is unforgettable, an ancient people choosing death in their sacred place rather than slavery outside it. For 6 days the fighting rages house by house, street by street. Fires consume entire districts, the smoke rising like black banners over the city. Roman legionaries push forward their sandals, slipping in blood and ash, their ears ringing with the cries of both foes and comrades. Carthage's defenders retreat ever upward until at last they are driven onto the citadel of Byrsa, the highest point of the city. They're surrounded, they make their final stand. You imagine the silence before the end, the air heavy with ash, the ruins glowing with embers, the people gathered in their last refuge. Scipio himself is said to have wept at the sight, murmuring lines from Homer about the fall of Troy. Even victors hardened by war recognize the tragedy of a civilization consumed in flames. Historians still debate whether Scipio's tears were genuine or rhetorical flourish, but the moment lingers a reminder that even conquerors can feel sorrow at the ruin of greatness. At last the citadel falls. The survivors are dragged into chains, their cries echoing off broken walls. 50,000 men, women and children are led away into slavery. The city itself is put to the torch. Flames roar through temples and homes alike, collapsing roofs, blackening marble, turning centuries of history into ash. Rome's soldiers scatter salt upon the soil, or so later legends claim, symbolizing that Carthage will never rise again. Whether the salting is fact or myth, the effect is the same. The city is erased, its memory scarred with finality. You wander through the smoking ruins, the air thick with the scent of charred wood and stone. Statues lie, toppled streets, cracked harbors, silent. The great merchant empire of the Phoenicians, which once stretched across seas and rivaled Rome itself, is no more. Only silence remains, broken by the occasional clink of chains as the enslaved are marched away. And in that silence you feel both triumph and sorrow. Rome has removed its rival, securing dominance over the Mediterranean. Yet something irreplaceable has been lost, a culture, a city, a way of life, swallowed by war. The Punic Wars end not in compromise, but in obliteration. As the night settles over the ruins, Scipio Aemilianus gazes into the flames. He is said to have whispered a prophecy that Rome too one day will fall, just as all cities must. For even in victory, the shadow of fate lingers. And you, breathing the smoke of Carthage's last breath, understand that the Mediterranean has been remade forever. The flames of Carthage burn low, and silence settles where once markets bustled and harbours sang with the creak of ships. The Punic Wars have ended, and the Mediterranean has changed forever. You walk through the ashes of a world remade, where Rome stands tall, and Carthage lies buried beneath rubble and memory. Yet even in the stillness, echoes of the struggle linger: the clash of swords at Trebia, the roar of elephants in the Alps, the cries of despair in Carthage's final hours. Rome emerges as master of the sea, its legions feared across continents. No longer merely a republic of farmers and soldiers, Rome has become an empire in all but name. Sicily, Spain, Africa, all provinces now feeding the republic's growing appetite. You can almost hear the grind of Roman roads, stretching outward, the pulse of legions marching, the hum of Latin words spreading into new lands. The Punic Wars have taught Rome resilience, adaptability, and ambition. Above all, they have taught Rome to dream of domination without limit. And yet you sense shadows in this triumph. Victory has come at a price: hundreds of thousands dead, fields, ruined families broken. Hannibal's name still drifts through memory, whispered in fear and admiration alike. Roman children, it is said, once frightened into obedience by the warning, Hannibal ad portas, Hannibal is at the gates. Even in defeat, his ghost remains a reminder of Rome's near destruction and of the brilliance that once challenged its might. Historians still argue whether Carthage's fall was inevitable or whether different choices might have allowed coexistence. Perhaps Rome's hunger made conflict certain. Perhaps Carthage's pride sealed its doom. A curious tidbit endures in later tradition. Some Romans, when walking past the ruins of Carthage, claimed to hear faint whispers in the wind, as if the city itself mourned. Whether superstition or poetic imagination, the idea reminds you that civilizations leave more than stone, they leave echoes in the minds of those who remember. You pause at the harbour, now silent. Once fleets had sailed from here to Sicily, to Spain, to distant lands, now only wreckage drifts in the shallows. Beyond the sea, Rome prepares to stretch even farther, to Greece, to Asia, to the very edges of the known world. The Punic Wars have cleared the way. The Mediterranean, once contested, is now Mare Nostrum, our sea, as the Romans will call it. Yet, as you stand in the ruins, you feel more than conquest. You feel the weight of human endurance, of choices made and lives spent. You think of Hannibal, the boy sworn to eternal hatred, the general who crossed the Alps and nearly broke Rome, now remembered as one of the greatest commanders of all time. You think of Scipio Africanus, the youth who saved his father at Ticinus, who grew into the man who shattered Carthage at Zama. 2 lives bound by fate, shaping centuries, and you think of ordinary people, farmers in Sicily whose fields became battlefields, merchants in Carthage whose ships were lost, legionaries in Rome who left their ploughs to die on foreign soil. The Punic Wars were not just contests of empires, they were human stories of endurance, pride, and loss. Now the firelight of Carthage dims to embers, the wars are over. The Mediterranean belongs to Rome, and Carthage is but ash and memory. You take a slow breath, letting the silence seep into your bones. History has reached its verdict, and the tale has been told. Now, as you drift away from the ruins and into the quiet of night, let your mind soften. The battles fade, the dust settles, the clamour of armies dissolves into stillness. The Mediterranean Sea, once roared over by fleets and thundered across by legions, lies calm beneath the stars. Waves lap gently against unseen shores, their rhythm steady, timeless, eternal. You breathe slowly, imagining the hush that follows storm. Rome and Carthage, those giants of history, have spoken their last in this tale. What remains is not the clash, but the calm, the gentle reminder that even the fiercest struggles must end. Empires rise, empires fall, and still the tide ebbs and flows, untroubled, unchanged. Let yourself feel that constancy now, as though the sea itself is breathing with you. Inhale with the swell of the waves, exhale as they recede. The voices of generals and senators grow faint, dissolving into whispers, carried off by the wind. What lingers is only peace, the kind that comes when stories are told and burdens are set down. The stars above the Mediterranean glimmer softly, just as they did thousands of years ago, just as they do tonight outside your window. Imagine them watching over you, quiet and patient, their light, a steady presence across the ages. You are safe here at the end of this long journey. The wars are done, the fires burned out, the city's silent. All that remains is the rhythm of your breath, the softness of the night, and the gentle drift toward rest. So close your eyes, let the story settle deep, and allow sleep to come like a tide, returning to shore, slow, steady, inevitable and calm. Sweet dreams.